audience look like in the sense of making sure I give proper examples that would relate?
It is all self-development,
Cool.
entrepreneurship, overcoming adversity, and yeah, that's really it.
Perfect.
All right.
All right.
Well, we hit the record button, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
Mr. Marc Champagne. How's it going, my man?
I'm 100%. I'm excited to be here with you, connect. We've been messaging back and forth for a couple weeks now, and it's just I feel grateful to be here, man. Honestly, thank you.
Yes, and the transparency in the email and, all that good stuff and sending you the positive vibrations and all that good stuff. So, I'm looking forward to this. I know the audience is looking forward to this for the Mitchell Report Unleashed podcast, and I know you got a lot of value to bring to us today.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Let's do it.
So, your journey, entrepreneurship. What was your journey like? We're gonna start a little slow here, a little slow
That's all
burn,
good.
all that good stuff.
Well, it's I love a question like this because I've never considered myself or never inspired to be an entrepreneur in any capacity. It kind of just happened. Out of school, I was always interested in business and marketing and communications, stuff like that. And I ended up going down that path, and it was in the healthcare space for about a decade in product and brand management and sales and so forth. But it was during that time that I started to work on my own self development and started picking up these, reflective practices. For me, that was always journaling and reflecting on good questions. And that's what actually pushed me into entrepreneurship kind of by accident because I got to the point where I remember I was traveling a lot for those roles, and I would journal digitally for the most part, just because I liked the idea that I always had a phone or always had an iPad with me, and that's how I was doing it. But at that time, and now we're doing it about 4 years ago, there was really nothing that existed that would help people or would guide people into starting or upgrading a journaling practice. You had the meditation apps that were really firing up, like Calm and Headspace. So it was interesting. It's like, okay, well, clearly people are open to being guided digitally from a meditation standpoint. But when it came to journaling, there was really nothing. There were kind of glorified word processor apps out there, and that's when the idea came for Keo, which was the app that we created and I co-founded and led. And that's what brought me into the entrepreneurship world. And even more importantly, I think really took me from being a how would I describe that? Being something that was someone really interesting in actually practicing the practices of journaling and reflection to someone all in that practice and helping as many people as possible fire up their rituals and so forth and get the most from what these practices have to offer.
You talk about that app. Now, my question to you is that app is no longer around. It was
Yeah.
87 million users, active users. You kind of erased it. You deleted it. Why was that? And can you give the audience some insight of why you did that and what it mean to
Sure.
you?
Yeah, that was a big deletion of an app and of honestly my identity over the course of those 3 years building it. Um, and just for just to clarify, I mean the 86.9 million, those were App Store impressions for that journaling app, but we still had I think at the end near 200,000 or so plus users come through that app, so it wasn't insignificant. Um, what happened, to be completely transparent with you, is that obviously people were interested in it because we were gathering that attention and attraction. Um, because we had like brand collaborations with which is awesome humans and brands and so forth, and we're bringing all these prompts and content in, so people were resonating with it. Where it didn't work though was financially. We couldn't, we really had a hard time getting people to convert and pay for premium content at that point. And it's there's no secret in the scenario. It's like your classic story. I mean, we waited too long to actually speak to our actual users because we were creating a product to solve my problem, which it did. But that didn't mean that It didn't mean that others on the other side really understood the flow as well as I did, obviously, in the team. So, long story short, we should have talked to users a little bit faster, been on top of our financials. We spent a lot of money to get it to where we were. And I think probably the biggest thing, Rory, is just we fell for our own hype. You know, when you reach 86.9 million people and you have all these write-ups and you're collaborating with like LinkedIn and VaynerMedia and all this stuff, and it's easy to to create this false sense of success, right? I mean, look, we're still talking about that big number because it immediately attracts, hey, I mean, and we're grateful for that because most apps don't even reach 100 people. I mean, it's not something that I don't think should be celebrated, and we're proud, obviously, because we were able to touch lives in a way that we know was is challenging for most scenarios, but not at the expense of, hey, is the business actually working, right? And it wasn't. And I think if we would have stuck out longer, no doubt, I'm sure we would have figured it out and so forth. But at the same time, myself and my co-founder, who's also my brother-in-law, we had very young families, and we had spent a lot of cash, and we were kind of mentally at the top of our peak in terms of what we could handle. And I know I felt almost hypocritical, if I just push through because I'm going against the practices that we're trying to teach, right? So it felt right to say, you know what, um, I think that app, that journey succeeded in probably 80+% of the whole situation. It's the only reason we're speaking today. It's the only reason I have the awesome podcast Behind the Human. I'm super grateful for, and the only reason I was able to write a book about this stuff and continue the journey around mental fitness. So it felt right. This was just one vehicle on that journey, at least for me, that it was time to kind of let that go, retire that whole space, and then continue down the path, though.
I love that. We talk about apps, you know what I mean? And there's so many apps. It's in the Google Play
Yeah.
Store, it's in the App Store, all this good stuff. So I know, like, as business owners and things like that, a lot of people create these apps and they don't see that mass amount of number and things like that. So was that ever, how do I say this? Was it ever overwhelming for you, like, just seeing all of that success come your way? And how did you really just determine between, like, heck, like, this is something real time here now?
Well, I think what was overwhelming, to be honest, was that we saw the success coming in terms of traffic, right? And it was hard to understand why Apple was featuring the app as new apps we love or app of the day, and then it would just snowball across the world. I think at the end it was probably 145 countries that we had some sort of feature at one point. And we're thinking, wow, I mean, we have essentially all this free traffic coming in, but we don't have the development experience, and we can't go fast enough or don't have enough resources to go as fast as we want to like actually capitalize on that, right? Because people were coming in, but they're coming out just as fast. And that was overwhelming and incredibly frustrating around the whole journey. So I mean, I'll take it because we were able to leverage a lot of those numbers and leverage that success to then partner up with other brands and other people and continue that process. And it's probably why Behind the Human as a podcast is a top ranking show, because I just kept that flow going. But it was overwhelming, and it was frustrating to have that disconnect, right? Or that almost being felt like we're being held back in a way. Like we had everything. We knew the marketing part, we knew the strategy part. It was like, how do we get like these solid developers? And I remember at that time too, I remember thinking like, man, I should have went to school to be a developer, because I felt like it didn't matter what app or what industry, if you were a senior developer of some sort, like, you had a job, and you had a good paying job, and we couldn't find anyone. It was insane, right? So that was frustrating, but at the same time too, that's where I think, again, practice what you preach. When it came to that moment, it was just, what can we control, and really sitting down, pen to paper, or in this case, we're using our own app, but with questions, right, to refocus. Like, there's certain things we can control on the development side. There's a lot that we can't. but I can control who the next collaboration will be with, or the next podcast episode, or whatever, right? And that's that's essentially where we focused.
And then you did your little bit of a bounce back. I'd say a major bounce back, leading you to write what
Yeah,
October, I believe I want to quote this right, October 19th, 2021,
yeah.
Personal Socrates, writing that book. What was that path
Yeah.
like, my man?
Oh man, I'm still very much in kind of like the launch mode of it, and um, just being on the receiving end of how people are resonating with the content and the prompts, and hearing, just all these different use cases that I didn't even think, would people would be using the book for, like journaling as a couple, or cross generations. I've heard so many cases where parents have picked up the book and then they see their kids reading it at the same time. Like, wow, that's incredible. I never thought of something like that. And the more I think about it, the more I realize, I mean, it's not the book, the way it's structured is not far off from how the app experience was. It's just it's analog, obviously, and because the book is essentially written through profiles, either from people that I've interviewed. So anyone living today, I've interviewed that are in the book, like the Ryan Holidays of the day, or of today, and James Clear and so forth. But then it's filled with people that have since passed, right? Like Kobe Bryant and Jane Austen and Stephen Hawking and so forth. But it's written in a way, just like the app was set up, that it's almost like micro content. They're 2 to 4 page profiles, so they're designed that, hey, while your coffee or tea's brewing in the morning, like you can pick that up, and that can be your mental fitness. It's short, right? You've got the story, you've got the angle to, let's say, a Kobe Bryant, and how he got up in the morning at 4 o'clock to get that extra workout in. Like, what questions can we leverage to do that and link it to our purpose, and what we're driven to accomplish, right? And then it's obviously loaded full of prompts. So, people are writing in the book, or they have a notebook, or they're using, a journaling app of some capacity. But the idea is, and it's the same as what the app was, how do you take relatable stories and perspectives or narratives from all these different walks of life and link that up with action? And the action are the prompts, right? Because the prompts give us the luxury of the pause. They pause our autopilot, get us to think, sit back, kind of stare up at the ceiling, and be like, I never thought about that in that capacity. And then link that back to where we're at in our lives. And that's the key, right? Because I mean, I can go on and preach about, morning routines and journaling flows and stuff like that, but we're all different. So the book is loaded full of profiles to meet you where you're at. You start with a prompt or a person that jumps off the page, because that's probably where you need to go, or what you need most, depending on what's going on in your life, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been incredibly rewarding, and I'm just excited to see what continues to come from just putting this work out there, because it's why we're speaking. It's why there's some courses being filmed. Like, I just don't, I didn't plan for that stuff. And I keep the app in the back of my mind, not to fall for the hype, right? It's ranked on Amazon and stuff like that. I'm like, that's cool, I'll take that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. I've been down that road before. But really, just actually be present. I think
Hmm.
if I had to summarize everything, it's just, being present with the whole experience.
Yeah, for me, journaling, the last, let's say 4 to 6 months, I've heard a lot of people talk about journaling, right?
Yeah.
And why, for you, in your own personal viewpoint, why does journaling work? And is it just like writing in a book? Can you break that down for
Oh,
the audience a little
yeah.
bit?
Good question. Good question. I'll start with the last part of your question, because I think it's so important. Um, and I fell in this camp too. When we say the word journaling, it usually links up to kind of pen to paper. And going back when I was running the app, I used to get this one all the time. It's like, oh, you're talking about the girl at school writing about the boy that she has a crush on, the 14-year-old or something like that. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, not necessarily. I'm talking about the people that we are buying their books, or watching their TED Talks, or listening to their interviews. They're asking really empowering and progressive questions. those are the questions that I'm interested in, and also helping people find those questions for themselves, right? So if you think of that, then the practice of journaling is reflection. And it doesn't matter what vehicle you're using. It doesn't matter whether it's an app or pen to paper, an audio note, or taking a walk and just thinking. That the practice of pausing and reflecting is the actual, magic, for example, right? So I think just starting there, no matter, who's listening, or where you're at in life, just kind of wash out any previous definitions and just start with, hey, it's just we're all asking questions. It's just, are they the right ones? Right? Life's a series of questions and answers. I mean, where do I want to live? Where do I want to work? Who do I want to be with? I mean, we're all doing this. It's just most of us are doing it on an autopilot and not getting past the surface and slowing down. And that's what I realized in the early mornings when I had that corporate job, when I was getting up to read about these people, that they were taking time to still their mind and really think, go past the surface, get to the core of things. And that's where questions can help. Right. So, yeah, it's been huge for me. I started it just because when I was hired in that corporate world, we were all essentially being put through the same training. I'm like, how possibly? And it was at that time, it was a sales job. I'm like, how possibly can I stand out if we're all being trained in the same way? And it didn't take long to realize that no matter who I was studying, 100% of them had some sort of reflective practice. Right? It's funny because, like, and I 100% agree with you, we're hearing more about journaling, but it's not like it's new. I mean, this has been around since the beginning of time. If you go back, one of the profiles in the book is on Marcus Aurelius, the one of the most renowned emperors of Rome. His book Meditations is his journal, right? And it's just taking time in silence just to process everything that's going on in his life, and in the decisions that had to be made and so forth, because we have the answers to most of the questions that we ask. We just don't have the clarity in our mind to actually see what those answers are, right? Or to see the path forward. And that's one of the things that journaling can do, is just help blow out that fog or blow out that mental clutter, so that then it's, oh yeah, hell yeah, like that's where I need to go, or that's the next step, right?
What about when we struggle with writing our personal thoughts down and things like that? Because I know for yourself, and I feel like
Yeah.
this with this podcast here, when we were in the email, you spoke about, having those trials and tribulations the last week or so where you weren't really
Yeah.
doing any journaling yourself. So, how did you use that book to bring it back to yourself and the experience that
Yeah.
you had to deal with?
It's a good question, and just to provide some context to the audience. So what we're talking about is, I guess it'd be about 7 days ago or so now. My second son was born, and there was some complications through the delivery and whatnot. When, long story short, he ended up in the ICU in Toronto, and my wife was also admitted to the hospital. And it was just a nightmare of 7 days, essentially, just full of uncertainty and fear and all of that, obviously. And just, so everyone knows, everyone's home and back and 100% healthy, which is amazing. So I'm super grateful for that. But I remember day two, I was with my in-laws. Thankfully, they're there to support, and we were in a hotel room in Toronto. And I'm like, I feel like it's probably time to do some journaling here, because I was, those 2 days were just no sleep and just massive fear and all this stuff. And I tried to journal, because normally I just free write and let things come up, and then I'll bring in the prompts and so forth based on what's going on. I had nothing, man. Nothing. I was just staring at the page. Like, my mind it was like it was locked up and just stuck. And obviously, I I've documented this since, just kind of because I want to look into it. I'm sure there's some good science that
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
revolves around just trauma, probably. And I'd love to write a little piece about it, because I noticed a progression. So on that in that case, I had nothing to just free write. It was blocked. So I defaulted, speaking of Marcus Aurelius and just stoicism, I defaulted to two questions. One, just to check in, you know, how, what am I feeling? and just trying to get like, even if they're one word answers, scared, fearful, terrified, whatever. They're words like that, but just slowing down, getting out of my head and trying to get into my body to feel the feels, right? And just that's human. It's normal. Just check in. And then the second question, just to try to provide a little bit of, what would be the word? A little bit of comfort in what was a really challenging situation, was to ask the question, what's within my control?
Hmm.
Which is, very much linked to a lot of stoicism out there. And in this case, and I mean, I think a lot of people can relate as well, just regarding everything going on with the pandemic and things like that, there's a lot that's out of our control.
Yeah.
But there are things that are within our control. And, I just listed out the things that I know, okay, this is probably the most trying time of my life. I need to be as healthy as possible. So I'm going to try to get some walks in between, the hospital visits, just to get some air and stuff like that. But just, again, like, if you don't do that, it's just autopilot. I would have walked straight to the hotel, or from the hotel to the hospital, and been there kind of all day. But even just taking 10 minutes to just take a stroll and try to clear my head, was key. Or in those scenarios too, we default to all of the comfort behaviors, right? Like, it would have been easy to eat like shit during that time. It's like, it's probably not the time I need to be doing that. I probably need to eat even healthier if possible, right? So just being aware that, okay, I can control that. I can control what I'm going to put in my mouth. I can control taking some time, or maybe do a little meditation. I did one in my son's room. There's nothing I can do in there other than just be there and have my energy. But maybe, why don't I just do a 10-minute, mindfulness meditation to just help, right? So yeah, so it was scary, because I've never, just being someone that's had a journaling practice for 12 years now, I don't recall ever having a moment where I had nothing, right? So it started with that, like I said, checking in, focusing on what I could control. And then I noticed, as the days started to continue, then I flipped into some gratitude journaling, because things were starting. Okay, well, there's a lot of good here happening in a traumatic situation and so forth. And slowly, getting back to normal and reminding myself, okay, there's a lot of great things, like on the work just stopped, obviously.
Yeah.
But just reminding myself, hey, there's some great and this podcast is being one of them, honestly, man. Like, I really looked forward to, and I think you probably tell through the emails,
Yeah.
of doing this, right?
Mm.
So just journaling on that, like, hey, once I'm out of here, there's some good stuff that's lined up, so hang on to that, right? So there's a bit of a flow. And like I said, I want to do a little bit of research on the science behind that, because I'm sure there's some sort of backing, but
Yeah, no, I hear you,
I'm
man.
super practical.
Yeah. One thing throughout this whole experience that we've captivated so far is your power and your art of storytelling, right? And I want to know, where does that come from? Because I feel like I get the same thing also too. When I'm on the receiving end, and, like, I'm doing more talking and things like that. And
Yeah.
some people are like, "You're such a great storyteller." Where did that come from with you? Like, where did you learn that this was your gift, this was your passion, to be able to deliver the right type of context?
Oh man. Well, first of all, thank you. I'll take that right in the heart. Thank you. But I don't even see that. Like, it's not something that I'm super aware of. I have received that before, so again, like, I'm gracious to get that, but it's not something I think about, to be honest. The only thing I can chalk it up to is that, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and I listen to hosts. The two that really come to mind the most are Cal Fussman from Big Questions, and then Rich Roll from the Rich Roll Show, and those are two hosts that are really good at storytelling and bringing people down a path and stuff like that. So I often, I'll pause the podcast when they ask a really good question, and I'll answer the question myself. And
Hmm.
it's almost like a bit of a practice to, well, if I was on their show, which Cal's, thankfully, that was a bit of a dream come true. I landed on his show recently. Rich Roll, we're still working on, if anyone knows him out there. But I mean, it's a way to just kind of have fun with the process. And then also, I feel like there's some training that's happening there, because I'm trying to, do my best in a response like that. And then also seeing how the guest on the other side answers and so forth. But on the other side, it's how I learn too. I mean, you probably just, if you're getting the same kind of compliments, like, it's a hell of a lot easier to stay engaged when you're listening to someone that's providing kind of that level of detail versus just like a stop, Q&A kind of question answer scenario. And I'm sure you've been on the other side of that as well when you've had guests come on. I have as well. It's not the majority, thankfully, but those are challenging, right? And like, if you think from the beginning of time, we've evolved through stories and traditions. So it's a natural part of our DNA, and it excites me to be able to have a platform like podcasting, and then the book and so forth. And the book writing obviously helped as well. I feel like that experience has leveled up a lot of different, just being clear with practices and concepts. And then for sure, when it comes to setting the narrative or story, the question I always would get from my editor was just, how can you make this scenario relatable to the reader on the other side, not knowing what they may be going through, but can you provide an angle that's approachable? Or often she would say, and a big shout out to Chantel Hamilton, she was just awesome, but she would say, the more vulnerable you can be in the story, the more vulnerability you invite back from the reader, right? And that's kind of always stuck with me. And I mean, there was no hiding anything from you when we were going back
Yeah.
and forth the book to show, because it's just real life, right? And it helps me process as well.
hmm The same, I say this to a lot of people. We all come from some sort of trials and tribulations, and I feel like with me, not to go too much into the story. I look at like 2019 around this time. We're recording this, and as we're in the new year, I always say to myself, mentally, I'm always going to be in a new year, and I never want to get back to what that feeling was like back in 2019,
Okay.
back in December, right? And now I've kind of conditioned myself the last 2 years to always be forward ahead and knowing that there's going to be trials and tribulations that are in front of me, but not to dwell on those things, because the
Yeah.
things that are out of that are in our control but out of our control also too, like life, and then there's death, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
when you make that sort of acceptance up here in your mindset, you can always push past anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you see like some of the most favorites that we probably idolize out there, to the Gary V's, to the Eric Thomases, you name it, whoever you resonate with, yourself, Mark, me, people really resonate with us, right? And it's
Yeah.
like they always want to know, like, what did we go through, where did we come from, what are the questions that we ask ourselves, to really be able to program ourselves like this. So yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Well, it's just, I think I resonate with that. I think for me, the way I try to live life is just always fall forward, because you have to fall. If you're not falling, you're probably not trying. But I want to fall forward, and like you said, kind of learn, not stay stuck in the past, learn from that and move on, right? And
hmm
that's what
hmm
happened with the app. I remember I was in Toronto at that point. I was working out of a co-working space, East Room, in the East Side. Um, I was the only one there. Well, not the only. I was the only one there from my team, I should say. And I'm sitting there looking at the laptop, and I'm looking at those big numbers, right? 86.9 million. And my next step is to hit delete from App Store. And all the wrong questions started to appear, right? How could we fail at such a colossal level? What would my family think? What would my ex-colleagues think? Because I left a job that wasn't one of those scenarios where I was, dreaded driving into work. It was just, I had an idea, I wanted to try it. Um, like now, essentially I failed. Like, what would they think? Or what would our advisors say? And I was stuck in those questions for, I don't know exact period of time, but definitely a few days, and just feeling like garbage essentially, until leveraging kind of the present moment and some gratitude practice that thankfully came through that app and the interviews, and the realization that, well, wait a second. Like you said, the people that we follow and we learn from, they're asking a very different set of questions, and they're asking progressive questions. Like, and the one that saved me from literally going into deep depression was, what do I want for my life? And that paused the narrative long enough to then put a plan together. Okay, well, if I want this, then, who do I need to speak with? What does that look like? What's the plan? And then all of a sudden you start regaining some sort of hope, right? Because before that, it was just, okay, I left an industry that I was doing well in, but throughout the journey of creating the app, I realized that that's not the industry I want to go back to. I found the work I really want to be involved with, but I just deleted the business that was keeping me in this industry. I'm living in an area, I mean, it's one of the most expensive cities in Canada. Can't even afford our rent at this point. We've got a 2-year-old. Like, now what? Like, what am I going to do type thing, right? And it's really hard to make good decisions when you're in that mental state of mind where for fear and anxiety is kind of taking place. And that's where I feel like journaling or questions specifically can literally right immediately in the moment pause that and shift you in. And it might not be for long periods of times, but just enough to ask a different question and shift your perspective to get out of that scenario, right?
Hmm. Good. I like that analogy right there. So let's get into this. Your favorite personal Socrates that you wrote. Who is that one particular person? It's a two-part question. And who, let's just say, let's fast forward. Let's manifest some stuff here. I like manifestation. Say you're going to do book 2. Who's that next big profile that you're looking to write on?
Oh, nice. I like it. There definitely will be some sort of book 2, and it'll most likely be related to questions. I'm just not sure if it'll be the exact same format as you see in Personal Socrates, or if it'll be something like looking at the biggest innovations throughout history and seeing which questions started them and how we can, apply that to our lives and our work. But let's say I did a V2 of the current book, brought in another 40 people, and let's pick someone that is alive today, because that would mean I would have to interview them and be in their presence, which then makes it real. I mean, that person to me, and he's referenced often in the book, is Tim Ferriss. Because he's a journaler, that's for sure, and he's got some serious, powerful questions. I've got a few of his in the last profile of the book, which is my profile, and it actually, speaking of where we're at in the year, when this is going to release, it's kind of it's the practices and the prompts to set up your new year essentially, and some of those prompts are coming from Tim. So I would love to actually sit down, with him versus just being a listener, a longtime listener of his show and his guests. And I've got a lot of my own guests because of his show, and actually some of them are in the book. Chip Conley, Jerry Colonna, those are all, I heard of those people all first on Tim's show. Cal Fussman, the opening profile, as I said. Again, Tim Ferriss. Ryan Holiday, another profile in there, Tim Ferriss. So yeah, there's a lot of people in there that I owe him a thanks to, that he put on my radar. And then now I forgot the first part of your question.
Oh, so no, I was saying, who is your personal favorite that you wrote so far in the book?
Oh yes.
And who's that next person? But you already answered the Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, I got the next
there.
person. Yeah, so I mean, it links, because I mean, there's a reason why Cal Fussman's profile is the first one. Throughout the whole editing of the book and kind of the early readers, people really resonated with his story, and going right back to what you brought up, just the art of storytelling. He is one of the masters, in my opinion. I often listen to podcasts in the morning when I'm exercising, and he's one of the few where I'll stop the workout because I just feel like I've got to give full attention to. He just gets people to hang on his words, and not surprisingly, I mean, he's written for Esquire for multiple decades and so forth, and he's interviewed so many different people. But I think probably the main reason is that his opening prompt and his profile is all about asking better questions, and the question is, how can I ask the best questions? And it turns out it's linked to presence, and there's all these different practices that he uses as a writer and as an interviewer, that it doesn't matter whether you're doing that or not, because we're all asking questions. There are things that you can do to actually trust your intuition after you've done the research and you've prepared for whatever you're doing, but trust that intuition to pull the right questions. So, as someone that studies questions and is that, curates them and is obsessed with them, He definitely was someone that he continues to inspire me, and I learn a ton from. Ton. Yeah.
Love that. Love that. I gotta check out the book. I'm telling you, I gotta check out the book. And
I
I'm
feel
gonna
like you'd
make.
like it.
Oh,
I'm
I have
biased,
a.
but I feel like
I'm
you'd like
buying it.
it.
I'm supporting. Here's my thing is, and I will want to spin this to everybody that's listening to this. Always support the creators of whatever their respective realm is. If you resonate with Mark, throw him a follow on social media. Go into his, bio on Instagram. Plug into the podcast. You know what I mean? You gotta always hype. You always gotta support other people in this world and buy his book. Like those
I appreciate
deposits,
that.
that social digital currency deposits that we have to continue to start making and things like that. But before we leave out of here, right? What's your secret when we think about profiting in the thing called life for 2022? My man.
Ooh, oh, what a good question. Love it. I mean, I'm in this now, and I'm going to continue it forward because I've seen the value of this. But the secret is presence. And because the more I study all of these people, and some that are in the book and many that aren't, and the ones that have passed, the ones that have left marks for hundreds of years, they've gone through a lot of different scenarios and experiences like we all do in life. But they always come back to some element of none of that matters, but where we are right here, right now, right? Because if I'm somewhere else mentally from this conversation, it's not a good conversation. And we've been there. We've had that. You can't host a podcast and not have that at one point. But when you are dialed in, whether it's an interview like this, or whether it's your work or with your family or yourself, right? That's when the magic shows up, because that stillness and that presence breeds the clarity that we're all seeking anyway, right? So the more, like, even this whole book experience, I mean, like I said, the biggest lesson from the app, don't get all caught up in the hype and all of that. So if I can put that to the side and just truly be with the experience of, this is my first, not my last, but this is my first book. I mean, I deserve to just be with it, right? And then I'll be able to see, okay, you know what? The course feels right and that partner feels right, and that one doesn't, because I'm not fogged with all of this other stuff, right? That's looping around. So presence, and the thing is that, selfishly we get a lot from that because we're in it, but I think even more importantly, the other people and the other teams or whoever you're interacting with, they get the most out of it as well, and they feel it, right? So it's kind of that thing that just gives back, and it's a loop that really doesn't let you down.
I love you say that. And, I always have these moments on the podcast where I say, just let that breathe, guys. Let it breathe. You get to that part of the podcast, pause, rewind, listen to what you just said there. 2022, it's about implementation, continuing on, forward progression. I know COVID's a thing. I get all this stuff is continuing to keep on going and then going and going, but never give up on yourself and never lose sight of your ultimate focus of the thing called life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Where can everybody grab a copy of this book and the name of your podcast, and where can everybody follow you on social media, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, and thank you for your presence. Honestly, great questions, great energy. Um, you made my afternoon. Like I'm gonna exit out of this recording energized and excited, right? Like I can't ask for anything more than that. So thank you. Easiest thing or easiest place is just behindthehuman.com. There's a whole bunch of different options for the book there, whether that's directly from the publisher, Baron Fig, which I actually highly recommend because they're not your traditional publisher. They make awesome notebooks and pens, and this is their first book. And anyone that picks up the hard copy, you'll see. And I only share this because I was a fan of their brand before they published the book. So I'll geek out a little bit on their stuff, but like their notebooks, they stay open. There's like a lay flat design that's in the book as well. And anyone that journals or reads books to then write and reflect on, there's nothing worse than the book opening and pages flipping all over the place. So pick up the hard pick up the hard copy if you're into that. And then all the socials are over there. The podcast is also called Behind the Human. So I'm trying to keep it simple and easy. One big word or three words, I should say.
Love that, my friend. Well, listen, let's continue to have organic conversations, inspire the 7 point some odd billion people in this world. And you're a breath of fresh air. This, like, we're going to do this again later on, 2022.
Yeah.
Bring you back on and things like that, and do a little bit of a recap, I like to say. But I appreciate you, appreciate your time, and let's keep in touch, my man.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep rocking it out there.
Thank you.